Business is made possible by our partners, Solar Dynamics, the most efficient energy systems.
Good evening and welcome to the People's Business. I'm your host, Wendy Burke. This evening, we are going to be looking at the topic of regional telecommunications and the reduction in roaming charges. To help me discuss this topic with me this evening, I have a number of gentlemen with me. I have the Minister of Information in Antigua, Mr. Melford Nicholas, who also serves as the President of the CTU, the CARICOM Telecoms Union. Good evening to you, sir. Also with me is Mr. Kurleigh Prescod. Yes, Mr. Kurleigh Prescod, the Vice President of Cable and Wireless Communications for Barbados and the Winward Islands. Good evening to you.
Good evening to you and your great audience.
Then I also have Mr. David Geary, who's a Digital Policy Ambassador. Good evening, Mr. Geary.
Good evening, Wendy. Great to have you be on the show.
Yes, and last but by no means least, Mr. Selby Wilson, who is the lead negotiator for the CARICOM Heads of Government with the CTU. Welcome to you all, gentlemen. We'll just take a break and we'll be right back to get straight into this topic of roaming charges. Well, welcome back to the People's Business. We're looking at regional telecommunications and the reduction in roaming charges. Now, as you know, sometime earlier this month, on the 23rd to be precise, Prime Minister Mia Mottley as well as Prime Minister Mitchell, they got together to sign the Declaration of St. George's, which looks at the elimination of these roaming charges. Now, if I can just get a sound off from each of you gentlemen as to what this really means for us as island people, and also in terms of the companies, how it would redound to your benefit. We can start the ball rolling with Minister Melford Nicholas.
Well, Wendy, and to your audience, the audience may be pleased to know that this is a first right direction. The CTU has been charged with a cluster of entities within charged of clearly we're not yet at the end of that.
Okay, we're having some technical challenges from you right now, Mr. Nicholas. If we can just see how we could sort your internet connection, and we'll move on to Mr. Prescod of CWC. What does it mean for you?
Yeah, well, it's just another opportunity for us to continue to serve our valuable customers and continue to improve the propositions we give. We know what we've been through over the past 2 years with the COVID pandemic. We know our citizens, our nationals are anxious to get back out and start, growing the economies right across the region. And this is our way to support that growth by providing meaningful, affordable roaming rates, roaming charges, roaming packages that not only bring prices down, but allow customers to eliminate things or reduce things like bill shock, where the bills that they incur at the end of the month are more than they expected, and to also simplify things. So just to make so customers are fully aware of how much they're paying when they're roaming.
Okay, and for you, Mr. Wilson, what does it mean for us within CARICOM? How do you see it?
Well, Wendy, CARICOM has been working on this initiative for quite a while now. It goes back to 2014 when the heads announced that they wanted to establish a single ICT space. We have always taken the view that the operators Caribbean operate a single network and that there should be no roaming charges of customers in the various CARICOM islands. But I want to make the point that we could not have got to this juncture today without the willingness and the support of the operators to address the concerns expressed by the heads of government. And I want to thank them for their willingness and their understanding in trying to address the concerns despite their fears and their aspirations of having a more conducive regulatory environment in which to operate.
Okay.
I want to thank the operators for that.
And if I can just get Mr. Geary to weigh in quickly before we go to commercial break. Mr. Geary? It seems as though Mr. Geary may be on pause. Yes. Okay. Well, gentlemen, we'll take a commercial break and hope that our other two guests can get those issues sorted by the time we return. We'll be back in a moment. Now, I want to start back with Mr. Prescod of CWC. And one of the things that was mentioned in this agreement and what we want is that the data and information in terms of our digital connectivity needs to be cheap and it needs to be fast. Now, you are from a company which takes its fair share amount of lashes, you know, as we go through the region. But in terms of the roaming rates now coming down and being lessened, how is this going to be impacting on your ability to be able to step up where you wanted to in terms of the costs that you're looking to plug in to enhance your digital infrastructure?
Our DNA is to continue to upgrade our networks. Yeah. So as customers' needs evolve, we've always been investing, we've always been enhancing, as evidenced by the increased speeds that we've been giving all of our customers right across the Caribbean, Wendy. In Barbados, we are a full fiber network with full, fourth generation LTE right across the island. We continue to add sites. We deliver speeds on average of 100 megabits per second or upward. And we're bringing those type of speeds right across the region. So us being able to provide, as you say, about internet fast and affordable is just part of what we're doing, part of our normal investment cycle. And this first step that we've taken to reduce roaming rates really does not negatively impact our ability to continue to deliver faster speeds at affordable prices. And actually, this is part of our objectives as a business. So the only thing that as we would have mentioned in the signing last week, is that, we still have a lot of high overheads underlying our businesses. Situations like high concession fees, universal service fee contributions, licensing fees. And if we can work with the government to bring those down, we could continue to make further improvements on the rates and packages that our customers enjoy, not only for internet and mobile, but for roaming as well.
Okay, Mr. Geary, are you with us now?
I am. My apologies for the internet connection, but I think hopefully it's better now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you quite loud and clear. What
Great.
are your concerns in terms of where the region is at, and not only reducing the roaming rates, but actually perhaps getting us up to where we need to be in terms of 5G and the other costs? Because some people from abroad do complain about our high telecoms costs for operating businesses in the region.
Sure. Well, firstly, let me apologise again for the internet connection. I'm not in the Caribbean, and that's probably why the internet isn't as good here as it would be, I'm sure, in particular on Digicel network in the Caribbean. But let me say that Digicel is very proud to be part of this initiative, delighted after all the hard work put in by the CTU, by CARICOM, by Dr. Pete Mitchell. I know Minister Nicholas in Antigua, and indeed Selby, as well as our colleagues in Cable and Wireless, have worked very hard over the years, and this is an initiative that's very welcome, really. It's always been very important to Digicel to bring world-class services to the Caribbean, and we see this as a further advance in the communications story of the Caribbean. Coming to your question, and as I think an earlier speaker mentioned, I think one of the things that we really will need to work on in the Caribbean is the real creation of a single ICT space. And I think if we're going to enjoy world-class services and continue to be at the cutting edge of developments in technology in the Caribbean, and let's remember, the Caribbean has such a wonderful opportunity. Its strategic location near the US, near Latin America. The Caribbean could be a world leader in the new digital economy. But in order to really reap the benefits of this, we need to work on creating a single ICT space where there's one set of rules, it's easier to invest in new technologies across the region, and consumers get the best services and meet global standards.
How do you envision that single space coming about?
Well, I think there's some interesting models around the world. We can look to Europe, where they also had 27 different countries now are part of the EU, and they came together to create a single regulatory framework. And you see there's a harmonized similar charges for licenses and regulatory fees and taxes and so on across those countries. So an operator in Europe that's operating in 27 different countries has a similar set of rules, or the same set of rules really, everywhere it operates. And that's the first thing I think that we need to work on. And then the second thing that's very important is the digital economy, of course, is not just telecoms anymore.
Okay, Mr. Geary has frozen on us again. If I can get the discussion on this single space continued and have Minister Nicholas as well as Mr. Wilson weigh in here, what is CARICOM in a position to do, and the regional governments, to help bring this about?
If I may, I'm hoping that my audio is much better.
Yes, it is.
And okay, thank you. I like that. But let me see if David, you're back, and I think you were in the middle of something.
I was just going to finish. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister. I was just going to say that the digital economy is more than just telecoms, and how we regulate and bring big tech into the regulatory space is a key question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad you're back with us. Yes, you can continue, Minister.
Yes. And I was about to say, Wendy, that a part of the framework that we came out of early last week, that we have started.
Okay. And you, Mr. Wilson, Selby Wilson, how can CTU help with this process?
Well, CTU and the heads of government have given a commitment to the operators to do a consultancy study on OTTs, the big techs, and the single regulatory framework in the Caribbean. We have already commissioned those two studies. We're in the process of reviewing those reports. And once they've been reviewed, they'll be shared with the operators, and we'll begin a new round of discussions on how we go forward with how we can go forward with new policy prescriptions in those areas. We have a challenge, and we are dealing with 20 sovereign states, and we have to get them somehow or the other to agree to abide by a regulatory set of rules which are standard across the Caribbean.
Okay, and does it seem as though that's going to be a Herculean task for now?
It is going to be a challenge, but I think it's achievable if we have the will to get it done.
Okay, well, let's hope that that willpower does come. We had some issues with you just now, Minister Nicholas. Are you there with us now? Okay, it seems that his internet is still freezing, and that's a bit interesting given the topic that we're discussing this afternoon about the telecoms. If I can come back to you now, Kurleigh, in terms of the sharing, because C&W for the most part throughout the region still has the lead in terms of the provision of the services, the fiber optics. Everything is still with you, and you have agreements with other providers where they share in terms of it. How much more would Cable and Wireless be CWC be willing to do in terms of being the lead in driving this process forward?
No, well, so Cable and Wireless has always consistently demonstrated its support in any of these initiatives. We are always at the table. We are always, because the thing about it is the things that the government, the head of government, and the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, what they're asking for, or what our customers are asking for as well. So we're absolutely happy to be at the forefront. Even where we have to work with our, partners, such as our colleagues in Digicel and so on. And you talked about us being the lead, but Digicel gives us a pretty good money on the mobile side, right? So they keep us on our toes. So but even despite the competitive pressures, we're absolutely happy to work with our operators for the ultimate benefit of the citizens of the Caribbean region, because that's what we're here for. Yeah, and only through our citizens advancing and our populations and our economies advancing do we all succeed.
The thing is, I'm not sure if it's really competition, because for the most part, we only have two players in the market now that we hear about, yourselves and Digicel. A number of other players came into the market when things were deregularized and changed up, but they didn't last. It's just CWC Flow and Digicel now. Do you think that when these changes come about, more players can actually join the game?
Well, let me chime in on that, because when you look across the wider Caribbean region, there are actually more players. In the Bahamas, there's a different player called Alive. There are different players called Logic and so on. Even in Trinidad, hyper-competitive market. So there are players, yes, in some of the other markets across the region. In Antigua, where the minister is, it's not Flow Internet there for the most part, right? There's actually a provider called APUA, yeah? Trinidad, I mentioned, has TSTT. So there's a sprinkling of competitors across the region.
Notice you said sprinkling.
Well, and I use the term sprinkling to mean they're all over the place, right?
Okay.
Now, yeah. Now, yes, there have been players who try to enter the market and they may not have survived. And as a function, coming back to the whole discussion about single ICT space, of scale. Telecom is a business that requires scale to succeed. The larger you are, the more customers you can have, serve from your network. The better it is, the more sustainable you can be. And if that single ICT space is established, it will allow operators to achieve that scale to, to be more sustainable and to better survive and to meet the needs and demands of the telecom sector. Listen, if it was that, the telecom demands of our customers in the region, and this is to remain competitive, we're not world class, then yes, there will be players able to come in and survive and provide, minimal speeds of 1 meg, 2 meg internet and 2G, 3G mobile. But because the demands and our populations in the Caribbean are so evolved, it requires investment to deliver speeds of 50 meg and LTE. And that's where the scale is critical to allow operators to be able to meet those needs of our customers.
Okay, just to let our audience know that they can feel free to call and question our panelists this evening, 228-5562, 228-5563, if you want to speak to the issue of the roaming rates or find out anything else that you want to know that's happening within the telecom sector. We have a number of gentlemen here this evening who can answer your questions. Now, I want to come back to Minister Nicholas, and Antigua would have its own separate issues to deal with where telecoms is concerned. This process has taken 15 years to get here, right? How much more is your government willing to do to ensure that we can meet this single space in under 5?
Well, again, it's part of process on the pin, and I wanted to make this point from the beginning. The whole idea of having a single economic space, the CSME. So it is really the digital layer of the CSME, and the government of Antigua and Barbados. One of the areas we'll have to. It's the whole question of the single regulations. Out of that, a new set of directions in which I am.
Okay. Okay, you are dropping in and out again with us, Mr. Nicholas. I'm not sure if you might want to log out and log back in to see if that helps any from on your end. Okay. Now, if I can go back to you, Mr. Wilson, in terms of the work you have been doing and the whole CSME. There's some who might be of the opinion that we're not moving swiftly enough in terms of really bringing the region together as one space, in terms of labor, in terms of telecoms, in terms of a single currency. So how are we supposed to be on this super information highway and to get our telecom sector up to where it's supposed to be? You've just admitted that there are some challenges. What more needs to be done in terms of policy, and can you tell me what are some of the countries, or who are some of the countries that might be lagging in terms of getting their things up to par?
Well, Wendy, we deal with 20 sovereign states, and that in itself has certain implications for how the economies and the political structure is organized across the Caribbean. That poses a challenge to us to get everybody on the same page on a particular issue. We have been able to do that successfully. If I think of World Cricket in or whatever year it happened, I can't remember the year. But when we think of World Cricket, there was an agreement to allow the free passage of people through the Caribbean once they entered at one Caribbean port. And that was a good example of what can be achieved if we have the will to apply and surrender some of our sovereignty rights to the regional good. I believe that with greater recognition of the benefits of collaboration and working together, as was done in the case of reducing roaming charges, is a good example of what can be achieved if we put our mindset and if we have the willingness to surrender or to collaborate more closely for the greater good of the Caribbean. and not for individual island states.
Okay.
I believe that we have to get to the stage where we look at regional initiatives which can drive the costs down for all our countries and provide regional services across the boundaries of the CARICOM states for our benefit.
Okay.
And if we can accept that, we will make progress.
I believe we have a caller on the line. Good evening to you. Okay. Now, seem to have lost that one. Now, we're talking about the reduction in the roaming, but there's a concern that we need to get to a place where we no longer have roaming charges. And for me to make a call to Minister Nicholas in Antigua should be the same cost as me making a call to someone here in St. Lucie via my mobile. And I want to hear from Digicel and CWC in terms of how soon we could see something like that. If we can, yes, we want to go to you first, CWC.
Yeah, sure. So elimination of roaming charges. I mean, I understand that is the objective of the head of government. Basically, where when you're traveling, effectively, it doesn't make a difference, right? And I believe some of the other speakers would have touched on. Currently, right now, we do have different license fee frameworks, different costs, and therefore different prices across the region, right, in the various markets. And that prevents us from being able to say, if I were to travel to St. Lucia, I can make calls at the same rate as if I'm back home in Barbados, yeah? And so on and so forth, because the rate differences are so, significant, are so material, yeah? Now, if it is, we can work together as a region, we talked about the single ICT space and the single economic space, and sort of, get things level. And, we even talked about things like currencies and so on, As we normalize and equalize these factors in each of the markets, you can then get closer to that space where you can have, similar rate structures and so on across the region. But at this time, given the disparities, it really is not possible to say. When you travel to a market, right, where rates are much higher, you can still make calls at the low rate that you may have available at home. So that is the challenge that we do have to overcome before we can say, we can really get to that point of full elimination of roaming charges.
Okay. David, if we can have you weigh in now.
Yes, of course. Well, I would agree with what was just said there by Kurleigh. Obviously, the providers have made a commitment to bring forward proposals that are going to get us as far as possible into that space during the course of this year, and that's what we aim to do. And Digicel, we had some years ago, I recall, a Roam Like Your Home package, which was at least on the calling side, trying to provide that balance. But as Kurleigh said, the issue is that we have totally different economies and totally different structures and regulatory environment in each country. So people, coming from one country experience a different set of rates than what they may people living in the country they may visit would be charged. And we want to get to a place where there is, one set of regulatory rules and one set of pricing. That would make our job much easier if we could, provide those sorts of services across the entire region and one set of base costs. You would find that it would be much easier for operators to provide services. Now, just on that, and we were talking about competitors a little earlier, we do have to recall that there are competitors who operate also at great scale globally, who provide voice services and other services that telcos provide, such as video streaming and so on. And they're not regulated, and they're able to provide services across the board. And it's quite easy for them to do so because they don't follow any rules, they don't pay any tax, and they don't have any employment costs and all the rest of it in the Caribbean. Now, the services on the whole can be very good, but let's not forget that they are cheating the system, if you will, by operating outside the rules. So rules that are going to work to really create a digital economy for the entire Caribbean region must include these service providers. And in terms of making services better and networks better in particular, we were talking about 5G earlier, how does this region pay for 5G? How do you roll out important infrastructure when the rules and the costs in all the different countries are different? And how do you do so when one set of competitors are using those networks to provide services, they're not paying any regulatory fees or taxes, and they're not paying for the infrastructure either? So an important question, this is a global question, it's not just for the Caribbean region, is how do these big tech players contribute to the cost of building out this infrastructure that they are using? Because that is one thing that drives costs massively for consumers in the Caribbean.
Indeed it does. But outside of them driving costs, let's look at the other options that the people of the region are taking, whereby we don't want to pay any cost at all. So we will pay our internet bill, but we will utilize all of the other services that are available through the various apps to make those calls, whether it be a WhatsApp call, whether it be Skype, what have you, knowing, well, we're just paying this bill, but we're not going to try to incur any long distance charges whatsoever. That must cost some hemorrhaging for you as companies and affect your bottom line.
Well, of course it does. Sorry, was that question to me, Wendy?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. Of course it does. I mean, there's two things. Firstly, now we're talking today about roaming of Caribbean nationals in the Caribbean, and we're fully supportive, obviously, of abolishing those as far as possible and eventually, ultimately. But the other side of the roaming coin, of course, is tourists coming to visit the Caribbean was a huge source of revenue for operators in the region, and that was very badly hit during COVID. Obviously, there was no tourism, and increasingly tourists use the WhatsApp and Skypes and so on as well. And one of the issues is, apart from the fact that that's a revenue challenge for us and it creates difficulties in terms of investing and so on, because if you don't have the revenues, you've less resources to invest. But also, while these services are very attractive and it's totally understandable why consumers use them and they're right to use them, what you see is a sort of a squeeze on the telecoms industry, and this is going on across the world. You see the profits of the big tech companies going way up, and you see telecoms companies, their revenues are staying pretty static. And really what's happening is by big tech companies saying they don't want to contribute, they don't want to pay for the network upgrades the telcos have to make and the investments telcos have to make in order to carry big tech services. Because they don't want to pay for them, they're saying you pass the cost on to the consumers in the Caribbean. And there's a limit to how much we can do this. So really, the big tech players, by keeping all of those profits for themselves and not paying for the services they use, they're taking long-term from investments that should be made to support the Caribbean people.
Okay, on that point, we'll take a break there, David. And remember, when we come back, you can feel free to call us at 228-5562, 228-5563. We're looking at the roaming rates within the Caribbean, which were recently reduced. The People's Business will return in a moment. And we're back with the People's Business, looking at regional telecommunications and the reduction in roaming charges. Before I went off, I was speaking to David Geary about the fact that the internationals aren't actually putting back into the regional economies, but they are reaping the benefits. Is it the same for you, Kurleigh?
Hi. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to address the question. So, in one space, so yes, where they're charging for services, yeah, where they're generating revenues from services that these big tech companies, offer. Correct. I definitely we fully agree that a portion of that, just as our portion of our revenue, has to go back into the networks, and a portion go to taxes for the government and so on. We fully agree that some slice of that revenue that they generate from the Caribbean needs to come back into the governments and these countries' economies. Yeah. So that we have no disputes about at all, and I think no one can really have a dispute about that, right? What I would say though is, where customers do leverage the advancements of technology, because the point you were making when at the start of the question was that customers would pay for the internet bill and then use apps like WhatsApp, for example, to make a phone call. I would say from our perspective that's a bit of technology advancement. Yeah, so we're not anti-technology advancement. We do believe that customers should leverage the technologies that are out there to gain the efficiencies that are available. So by all means, that's something we support, and that's why some of our very own providers here develop, apps that allow customers to make, on-net calls to each other for no cost, because we do agree that is part of it, and we as operators do have to evolve our business models, right? So I don't want folks and listeners and the audience to think that we're stagnant and we believe that the same revenues that we generated 20 years ago, we should still be counting on now. Yes, we know there will be some revenue streams that will disappear, and we as businesses have to evolve and innovate to replace and even grow new revenue streams to replace some of those legacy revenues that will depend on legacy technologies, which are becoming obsolete. But I would absolutely support David's call where these big tech operators are coming in and doing streaming services and streaming video and selling services, and customers are paying for those services. But absolutely a portion of that needs to come back into our economies to help our networks grow, for us to provide services to our rural destinations or folks who have difficulty to afford, and to keep the networks maintained and supported.
Okay, I want to thank you very much for that. We have a caller on the line. Good evening to you. Hello? Go ahead with your question.
Wendy, while we wait on our customer,
Yes.
can I make a comment?
Of course you can. Go right ahead.
I'd like to comment that I've heard the views of David and of Kurleigh on the question of the operation of the big tech companies and the OTTs. But I want to make the point that this is not peculiar only to the Caribbean. It's an international problem. Some countries with bigger markets and with the presence of those operators in their markets have been able to take steps to bring them into the net a little more closely. So it is not that the Caribbean does not recognize it, but it's whether or not we have the muscle to get it done in a time frame that is suitable to the operators.
Understood. Let's hope
And
we
it
can
becomes
build
very
that muscle.
difficult. It becomes very difficult if they don't have a presence, and if they don't consider the markets to have sufficient scale to abide by any dictates that we might hand down to them.
Okay. Our caller's back with us.
It is a global problem. It is
Okay.
not a CARICOM problem. It is a global problem.
Okay. Good evening to you. Okay, the caller has hung up on me. I guess they will call back if their question is burning enough. Yes, I'm listening.
And just, I'd like to thank Selby for raising that point, and he's absolutely right. Of course, it is a global problem, and this reinforces, to my mind, the importance of the single ICT space. This is why it's so important, because the Caribbean needs to operate at scale in the digital economy. We are a collection of relatively small countries, beautiful countries, but they're very small in the global context. And by working together, by having a regional ICT space, we can be a power to be reckoned with by the OTTs. They can't, ignore the whole Caribbean. And this is, what Selby said is exactly right. If the Caribbean can act together and require the big techs to register locally, to pay tax locally, to provide information to regulators locally on exactly what they're doing and how much data they use and how many customers they have and so on, this would be a step forward. And this really, I think, is one of the, to our mind, one of the main objectives and one of the most important things that the Caribbean can work on in the coming months and years or so, to try and get these big tech players to recognize the Caribbean, because, and just to finish the point, they do engage with other countries, they do contribute in other countries, they do support projects in other countries, they do follow the law in other countries, but they don't do it in the Caribbean. Well, why not? I think enough is enough.
So do I. Let's go to our caller. Good evening to you.
Hello, good evening.
Yes, good evening and welcome to the People's Business.
Yes, ma'am. The question to Digicel. My bill is $213 every month, and I go on 50 channels of nonsense that I don't use whatsoever. 50 channels of music that I don't listen to. I would like my daddy to reduce the out of my bill.
What he's asking you, David, is if he's paying for a service with the channels, but there are a number of them that he's in no way interested in, can that be taken out of the data package?
I'm not quite sure if I follow the question. When
He
you say
has,
channels, that is, are you talking
he
about
has the
television channels?
Digicel, yeah, he has the Digicel TV package. So he's saying
Well,
about 50 of them are of no use to him.
Well, I understand the problem, believe me. I'm not a television watcher really myself, but I do know a little bit about how these TV packages are sold. One of the issues is that there's different packages and different bundles, obviously. So you can get, more channels if you require, and there's kind of premium tiers and different levels of subscription. But one of the issues is, of course, that from a TV rights perspective, we can't just sell them individually. Many of the contracts that we have come as bundles to us, or we have to pay based on the fact that it's broadcast as we're required to broadcast channels together to certain numbers of customers and so on. So it's not just, you cannot just disaggregate them all and say we will sell them individually or at present personalize experiences. I imagine that will come. I do think that is the way it's going, that personalized services is something that we can look forward to. Digicel, as you know, have also got great apps. We have streaming apps that you can look at television and movie content on your phone. And I think some of those provide really great value and some very good offerings, and they're worth checking out.
Okay. Another caller's on the line. Good evening to you. Good evening. Go ahead with your question. Don't listen to your television, just speak to your telephone. Good evening.
Hello?
Yes, good evening. Go right ahead, ma'am.
Yes, good evening. Hello?
We're hearing you. Go ahead.
Yes, I with Flow, and I get 500 minutes a month, and sometimes I don't even use 200 minutes, and I talk about rollover, but it don't roll over.
Okay, that's one for you there, Kurleigh. She's asking about the whole issue of the rollover minutes, and she uses less than half of what she pays for, but they never seem to roll over.
Right. So we actually do have package options which do roll over as well. So it all depends on the package you pay for, right? So there are packages that basically you have an allotment of minutes. Whether you use it or not, that's what you pay for. But we do have propositions which allow the rollover of minutes. So it's just a case of selecting the relevant package for that. Yeah.
Okay. There's another caller on the line. Good evening to you. Good evening. Go ahead with your question. The panel's listening.
Good evening.
Yes.
Kurleigh, if I may ask, why it is that you can't have a rollover as a standard feature on all your packages? What is the restriction on not having a rollover? If you buy a package and you haven't used all of it, why can't you not roll it over automatically?
I wouldn't say it's a restriction. It's really a commercial offering, right? So there are some customers that like the simplicity. Yeah, there are some customers. It's really about choice, Mr. Wilson. You know, these set of things.
It's not only choice.
No.
Let me choice.
I believe our callers hung up on us.
And not use all of it and then lose it.
Yes, right. So as I say, because
that's
what I'm saying to you, if I could finish.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, is there are some customers that is not of value to them. So, it's really a case about why it may be something that you desire, Selby, and that's why it would be made available to yourself. There are some customers like the simplicity of, this is my flat rate, this is my minute, this is my data, that sort of stuff. And they pay for, they pay a flat price. They use what they have, and whatever, they don't use it, we reset from a month. Because rollover affects the price of the package, right? And this is where I guess I'm sort of trying to get the message across. For a customer that does not desire to, purchase a package with that rollover facility, then there's that facility available for them yeah.
Okay.
And even over rollover packages, there's a limit, there's a time, right? There's not infinite rollover. There's always a limit for the rollover.
Kurleigh, I have one for you that just came in on
We have a caller in, Selby. We have a caller in.
phone. And the person is saying if they're with Flow and they're roaming, but when they connect in, say, Grenada or St. Vincent and the network is still Flow, why should it still be roaming? Will this change now that we've seen the reduction? Will there be some temperance to that situation?
Right, exactly. And this is, I guess, is the topic of this evening, right? So, correct. When you roll onto Flow, as we mentioned earlier, there are still differences in rates and costs across different islands. So the rate that we have in, say, St. Lucia, the rate that we have in Grenada, and the rate that we have in St. Vincent are not exactly the same. And the costs that we have in these respective markets, the different governments, regulators, and so on, they have different tax structures and regulatory fees and contributions and so on and so forth. So that prevents us from being able to offer that same seamless, as you go, you just pay one rate or you pay the same rate that you pay in each market. But what this declaration, this commitment that we've made to reduce roaming rates is that you will now pay a reduced rate, a lower rate, as you roam to a different island. And whereas before there were different rates depending on which country you are from and where you're roaming to, now we're saying for whatever country you're in, you would pay one rate regardless of the CARICOM, one roaming rate regardless of the CARICOM country you're in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now before we go to our other two callers on the line, I want to ask Minister Melford, if once you're back with us technically, what are the concerns of the Antiguans? What was their response when they heard about this reduction? Minister Melford?
The Caribbean was similar. Yes, I'm hearing.
Okay,
can you not hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Was similar to what I witnessed in Grenada or elsewhere across the Caribbean. It's welcome good news, and something that people have been yearning for a while, and it could only be, that is required for us to get a single regulatory environment, so that more of these similar benefits can be done. I think pressure will be on our respective island governments to be able to stay with the initiative until we find an outcome.
Let's hope that outcome comes soon. We have two more callers on the line. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Yes, go right ahead. Yes, we're hearing you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to see that we have Flo and Digicel on the panel, and I celebrate the reduced roaming charges that these two service providers are bringing to the Caribbean. I have a comment relative to number portability. While I celebrate the reduction in roaming charges, I want to know what are the challenges Digicel and Flo are facing in allowing customers in Barbados to move with their numbers across the two providers? I believe customers of both Digicel and Flo can benefit from the opportunity to move with their mobile numbers. When can we in Barbados have that opportunity, regardless of our service provider, be able to move with our number to the competition? Could you explain and expand on that?
Okay, you heard the question, David and Kurleigh?
No, we didn't.
Oh, okay. Well, the question he's asking is about the numbers. I have a 230 number with you at Flo, and with David I have an 820 number. But he wants to know about the possibility of individuals being able to maintain that telephone number even if they switch providers. Is that going to be feasible or possible in any way?
You want me to go first, David? Just want to make sure we don't talk over each other.
Please.
I could go ahead. Yeah, actually, so in the case of Barbados, if I understand, Wendy, that question is for Barbados?
Yes, he's in Barbados.
Yes, yeah, correct. Yeah. So in the case of Barbados, yeah, number portability is actually in progress. So the operators, our colleagues at Digicel and us are working together. We're collaborating together with the good folks at the telecom office under the Ministry of Information, Telecoms, and so on, to bring number portability, both fixed and mobile number portability, into Barbados. It's planned to happen this year. Things are progressing well, so we hope definitely by the end of this year that ability to port between the various providers will be available to our customers.
Okay, and no timeline?
By the end of the year, as I said.
End of the year, okay.
By the end, before the end of the year. I don't know if David wants to add.
Okay, David, what about Digicel and this number portability?
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, the process is ongoing in Barbados, and we should have it soon. It works very well in the Actel countries, Jamaica, Trinidad, and other places. It operates already in the Caribbean, so it will be the consumers in Barbados this year that the regulator is running the process, and it involves setting up some systems and so on. But it's pretty well going to work like we have it in other parts of the Caribbean. So yes, your caller will be able to switch providers, and I really hope he's planning to switch to Digicel.
We'll see. We have another caller on the line. Good evening to you. Good evening. Are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay, the person is hung up. Remember our call numbers this evening, 228-5562, 228-5562. We have to take a break here, gentlemen, but we'll be right back. Okay, there's a call on the line, but before I go to that caller, there's another question that was just sent. It asks about the reduction in cell phone prices. They're saying prices are just really high, and we see what overseas prices are. Not necessarily on a phone that just launched, but on the older models, prices are still too high. So they're asking two questions in one: the cost for the bill and also a reduction in the cost to handsets. Is there anything that we can do right now, Kurleigh and David, given that we source everything from the international market? You can go first.
To take that one first.
Yes, David can go first.
I can go for. Oh, thanks, Kurleigh. Well, it is a difficult challenge. Look, increasingly handsets are provided by the handset manufacturers, really, and it's sort of a business that you'll find all over the world that operators are getting away from. We're obviously trying to provide as much value as we can. I mean, we have Digicel handsets, for example, that are great value, and we continue to push the manufacturers to try and provide us the best prices. And I'm sure Flow are doing the exact same. On the price of services, it's a competitive market. All operators are trying to provide the best possible prices. We have to be realistic about where we are in terms of global price inflation that's going on, and certainly probably is not going to be helped by the very unfortunate, terrible events that are ongoing in the Ukraine at the moment. But it underlines the fact that we are in a global market. Supplies of all the inputs that go into telecoms, be it equipment, energy, and so on, are sourced on global markets. These have a huge impact on the prices in the Caribbean. But to come back to what we're talking about, one of the best ways we can ensure that we minimize the costs of providing services in the Caribbean is to create a regional ICT market, so that when we go out to buy equipment, or when we go out to raise money on the international markets, we're talking about one set of regulations, one set of costs, ideally one set of taxes. As Minister Nicholas rightly said earlier, it's more than just an ICT space we need to create as a region. We need to create a economy, and that is really how you get economies of scale, and that is how you drive prices down.
Okay, and your response to it, Kurleigh?
Yes, so yes, this is a challenge, as David would have said. These handsets are sourced internationally. Yeah, the prices are set by the manufacturers, and as these manufacturers continue to put more in these phones, I mean, these devices are getting more and more capable with a lot more processing power. You can do conference calls on these phones now, and so on and so forth. And the demand is there. And listen, this is the thing about these prices for these phones. Yeah, the demand is there. The phones become more complicated, they become more sophisticated, and even though the prices go up from the manufacturers, right across the world, because of customers' lifestyle, they want to do WhatsApp, they want to do all these great things on the devices, the demand remains. Now, obviously, in our promotional efforts, we do, incorporate we do subsidize some of those costs if customers take certain packages to make it affordable and accessible. But yes, that's a headwind we're going to, because the demand is there, and therefore the prices continue to hold or go up accordingly.
Okay, gentlemen, we have a caller on the line. Good evening to you. Good evening. Go ahead with your question.
Oh, hello. Good night to everyone. I'm calling about, I'm a Flow customer, and I pay for 100 megabits per second download and 150 megabits per second upload, and I've just tested my internet speed, and I'm only getting 40 and 47. I'm in the best area in my house to get the internet, and this is not the first occurrence. Sometimes I get down to 5 and 10. I would like to know what can you do to have it better, I guess.
Got it, Kurleigh?
Yeah, I'm sure, definitely. So obviously, I would suggest you contact your service provider because, you know, for the most part, we ensure our networks are operating optimally even at peak times. Even at the times when everybody's on the internet, we monitor our network to ensure that customers can still get, 100% of their speeds and so on. In our experience, we tend to see challenges like, the source of the website or the speed test site that they're using. So we generally recommend to use a speed test site that's local. Wi-Fi is another situation that impacts the performance of speed tests. So sometimes you just have to make sure you're on the right frequency channel, a 5 gigahertz channel as opposed to a 2.4 gigahertz channel. But assuming all that is eliminated and you've contacted your service provider and they confirmed, and they could do all the relevant diagnosis and troubleshooting to see whether or not you just have to change the customer premise equipment in your home, or whatever else needs to be done. So my recommendation on that, I could assure that customer there that it's absolutely not a global issue. So I think with a little bit of support and one-to-one troubleshooting, we should be able to identify what that issue is and have it resolved.
Okay, I want to come back to Minister Nicholas and Mr. Wilson on this whole issue of the conclusion of the framework that we've been working so hard on. Prime Minister Motley was saying that it is hoped that it could be concluded within the next 12 to 18 months, which seems reasonable to me given COVID and the problems of getting all of the heads together. We no longer meet as we used to. But for you two gentlemen, is this timeline indeed feasible?
What we have discovered from the elimination
to get to the
is that you must work with a very tight timetable to keep people focused and committed to the process. So if we have to go to a single regulatory space, I don't think it is unreasonable to set a time frame of 9 to 12 months to accomplish that objective. I think it would help people to be focused and committed to the process. We don't want people to get negotiating fatigue, and that comes about when the negotiation is open-ended and it goes on and on and on, and no progress seems to be made.
Okay.
So I rather prefer the model of working with a very tight time frame and be committed to it and try and get it accomplished in that time frame.
Mr. Nicholas, your take on the issue before we go to break?
Yes, please. I just wanted to indicate framework agreement is something that the negotiators and the operators are, along with the study, can come commonplace in 12 to 18 months. What then is necessary would be the commitment of the state government. I think that's where the challenges could present themselves. But the time frame that is doable.
Okay, so let's hope that we can all get to the table and ensure that, as Mr. Wilson says, we don't end up with negotiation fatigue. Gentlemen, we're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we'll talk more about the reduction of roaming rates in the region. and the People's Business is back, and we're going to head straight to the phone lines, gentlemen. Good evening to you. Good evening. Don't listen to your television. Just speak to us via your telephone.
Good evening. My question is, I don't know if it's directly associated with that, but it has to do with the telephone. I would like to know why, when the electricity is off, you cannot use the phone. Why should the two be connected? I don't understand.
Okay, and is this a cordless phone that you have?
Well, I have two different kinds of phone, cordless and one with cord. But
okay.
It's just that every time the current go off, the electricity go off, you can't call anybody for help or anything. Why should the two be connected? I don't know the mechanisms, but I don't think that's right.
Okay, I don't know if maybe you want to take this one, Kurleigh, since there are more CWC landlines than we do have Digicel. She's asking about the electricity going off and the phone becoming non-functional.
Good point. Good discussion there. So we sort of, historically and traditionally, even when electricity went, the old legacy copper networks that we operated, still continue to have a landline, powered. So basically, at your home, if you had a traditional landline telephone, you could have still made and received landline telephone calls. The reality is that copper network that we use that offer that facility, cannot keep up to the demands of today's broadband customer. Yeah. So our broadband customers today who want to watch Netflix, who doing Zoom calls, who doing meetings and all of these great stuff and uploading, on social media, uploading, gigs of photos, that cannot be supported on those legacy copper networks. So the type of broadband network that would support those type of applications and use cases are, the next generation broadband networks. And in the case of Barbados, fiber to the home networks. And those fiber to the home networks, they use equipment which are powered at the home, right? So the way forward as we have these new generation broadband networks, there's a UPS option, so customers can avail themselves of a UPS at their home, and that UPS can keep your equipment, your customer premise equipment, the equipment at your premises, powered for a period of time, 1, 2, 3, 4 hours, depending on the state of the battery. While you have no power until the power returns. So that's one option. This we have available. So you can, contact our stores and get a UPS for the equipment at your home. The other option, and this is the option I think as we move forward and as, customer demands and so on evolve, is really your mobile phone has a battery, right? So even though you lose power, your mobile phone continues to have power, to be power. It has power, it doesn't lose power. So you can still make and receive calls. Not only can you make or receive calls, you can, contact people on WhatsApp. You can make a video call. You can take pictures and send pictures and so on and so forth. So really and truly, as customer needs evolve and as the technology has evolved, we see we have those two options to our customers to ensure that they continue to have access to service during a power outage. Either you get a UPS for your equipment at home, or you can just rely on your mobile phone to maintain communications during a power outage.
Thank you, Kurleigh. We have another caller on the line. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Good evening. Go ahead.
Yes, please. This is directly to Mr. Prescod. When Flow, to my understanding and knowledge, started the fiber optic cable, the installation of the phones came with a box. Now, there are many Barbadians in Barbados who carry this box. But after a while, those boxes were stopped being issued. That's the reason why the lady called in. Now, to my knowledge, you now have to purchase this box. Now, when the electricity goes out, forget about the cell phone. We're dealing with the landline. when the electricity goes out, that landline is no longer working. For those individuals who did not get a box, they're in dark sky. Why did Flow stop issuing the box upon installation of the landlines? I've spoken about this on
Right, so let me sorry, is the caller finished?
Yes, you can respond now, Kurleigh.
Yeah, sure. So, all right. So, the caller talks about, when we move customers to fiber, we gave them the UPS. I guess that's what he refers to as the box, right? The UPS is the uninterruptible power supply, which continues to power the equipment at the customer's home in the event of a power outage. So, we still do provide those UPSs. The UPSs we do provide, so the reality is many customers, because they have the option for the mobile phone, they don't really require it. They say, no, it's fine. In a power outage, they will use their mobile phone. So really and truly, why we provide those UPSs, that yes, there is a price for it. So those customers who have asked for the UPS, we have, either allow customers to purchase it or they can pay a small monthly fee for it. And they will have that UPS facility. And I want to stress, it's not as if there's no other option. There is the mobile phone option available, which many customers, the vast majority of customers have chosen to use. But for those customers who prefer to have the UPS, yes, we have that available for customers who wish to purchase or to rent. And what we have even made the decision for those vulnerable segments of population, elderly folks and so on, that require it, we will make a concession for those specific customers. So we do make allowances for those customers who, at home, pensioner just requires that facility. We do have the discretion at our stores to provide that UPS at no charge. But I would absolutely stress the standard offering is a purchase or rental option for that UPS. We do have them available, so any customer that wishes to have one, they are available at our store today. At our stores today, but customers can also utilize, and basically mobile is pretty much universal in Barbados. We have 300,000 mobile phones in Barbados and less than 100,000 landlines. So it's clearly the option that most customers choose to use.
But I'm glad you mentioned before, Kurleigh, pensioners, because there are some people who will refuse to use a mobile phone. My mother had three and she hasn't used one up to this day. Give her landline or she will use nothing else, So we still have that. Yeah.
And absolutely, which is why we said we make the allowance for the certain vulnerable segments. Yeah. So I mean, we're not we understand the legacy, we understand the tradition, so we do make allowances for those customers. But I do want to stress when the standard offering from the store is a purchase or rental option.
Understood. Gentlemen, we are going to take a break here. Yes. Yes, Minister, go ahead.
Yes, I want to chime in very quick. This issue that the ladies does really open my eyes to another impact. And for the Winward Islands, and certainly Antigua, we're in a hurricane belt. And sometimes it's storm.
Okay.
One of the first safety measures is suppression of electricity. So good if but I'm thankful that it was raised. It's an issue that we'll have to look into, market.
Maybe we can move towards satellite phones, Flo.
Well, the satellite phones still need a battery, yeah? So what I would say, absolutely, Minister, this is something we take very close and dear to our hearts. I mean, we have been the recipient of these hurricanes and natural disasters, right throughout our islands. So it's something we take very seriously. So we take very seriously when we build our towers for mobile sites, and they are resistant to hurricanes, and they can withstand hurricanes, and survive hurricanes. We do ensure the majority of our critical mobile sites are generator powered, so even post-hurricane, those sites will continue to operate, and customers can utilize their mobile phones to gain access to communication. The realities of the landline side, after a hurricane, most of the cables are on the ground there, to be quite frank. So us, providing UPSs to everybody will be of no consequence if all of the cables have been blown away. So it's really a case of, that mobile phone being your sort of first call of defense after a natural disaster. until
Yeah,
we are able
but
to
but
restore
with respect,
fiber.
Curleigh,
Okay. It
with
is, it
respect, Curleigh,
is. Yes.
with respect, taking a direction from an hurricane, I'm speaking about even in a warning where the hurricane does not hit, but it is warning as part of the safety mechanism. And if when the power goes, the communication goes. That is the challenge that we have. So even when the simple fact of the press is an issue.
True, Minister. Okay, we have to take a break here, but gentlemen, when we return, I wish from you your parting shots in relation to the reduction of the roaming and where we need to go going forward to make all of these costs accessible to us as customers and to you as providers. We'll be back in a bit. Okay, gentlemen, I want to think from you now your top 3 takeaways, not only in terms of the reduction in roaming and the agreements we need to move to, but also in terms of the creation of that single ICT space. And I'll begin with you, Mr. Selby Wilson.
Well, my first takeaway is that I would like to encourage the operators to promote their packages aggressively and to deliver what they promise that they can do in reducing the roaming charges. And that is to maintain credibility in the process and in the actions of the operators and the policymakers together. I would also like us to commit to working collaboratively, first of all, on the single regulatory framework. I see that as an important activity, a challenging activity, but it is not beyond our reach.
Okay, on to you now, Minister Nicholas Medford. Your top 3 takeaways.
Same, because Selby and I work within the same team, but I would think that of the 3, the greatest of them would be the benefits that we have put in the table before, marketing efforts, rates, and of course to be able to. Big takeaway for us.
Okay, I'll go to you next, Kurleigh.
Hey, good evening. So yeah, I mean, three big takeaways. Firstly, we're happy, really pleased to be part of this process, part of doing this hard work and bringing this additional value to our customers. As I said earlier, we believe this is part of the evolution to continue to be providing more and doing more for our customers. So we'd be happy to be part of this, and you know, we are hopeful we can do even more. So my second big takeaway is we are hopeful we can do even more reductions. You know, there's all this discussion about the elimination of roaming rates entirely. We're hopeful to do so, but you know, it's a two-way street. So we're going to have to sit and discuss and negotiate with our government partners. There are a lot of regions where our regulatory fees, our franchise fees, our concession fees are a high percentage of our gross revenue, you know, upward of 10%. So those are the sort of things we need to regularize. And if we could bring that, regularize and bring those fees down, and, you know, if governments are worried about, hey, well, if we bring those fees down, we're going to lose revenue. Well, there's the avenue of, you know, recovering that revenue from our big tech, you know, players that are in the space, right? So this should be revenue neutral for the governments, but it's really about spreading that regulatory cost, that regulatory overhead across all the players in the sector. So, you know, that's sort of our second big takeaway, that we want to bring more to our customers, and we look forward to working with our government partners to do more for our customers. And our third big takeaway, you know, absolutely, this single ICT space, there are lots of opportunities in that, you know, when we talk about harmonizing spectrum allocations for 5G. We talked about 5G earlier. So if you were looking for simple, consistent deployments of 5G, so that the handsets we use in one market can be used right across the market. So coming to David's point, we can get economies of scale in procurement of handsets and so on and so forth. And there are a number of opportunities around that regard. So if we can leverage and get that single ICT space going, and we also talked about using that single ICT position to be able to negotiate better with our big tech partners, then we certainly is going to redound to the benefit of the citizens. So we're here to partner with our government partners, and we look forward to making it a reality, just as how these reduction in roaming rates have become a reality as well.
Okay, and David Geary, your three takeaways.
Thank you, Wendy. Well, firstly, as I said, Digicel is delighted to be part of this initiative, and it underlines our commitment to the Caribbean and to bring best services and world-class services to the Caribbean people. So, I mean, our absolute commitment to bringing this roaming initiative forward. Secondly, I think the single ICT space is very important for the reasons that the other speakers have discussed. I think bringing this forward and getting a framework together within 12 months is vital for bringing prices down for consumers and for having a fairer regulatory system, both for operators and also ultimately to regulate the digital economy going forward and give us the kind of scale that allows us to have a real presence in the global digital economy. But the third point I'd make is, and the third very important issue is, we don't need to wait, and we should not wait for the outcome of the single ICT space review before beginning to regulate big tech in this region. Because if we think about it, it's going to take a few years for the ICT space proposals to be enacted into law and to become a reality. And the thing is moving so fast now, we don't have that time. There are steps we can take today. We can amend our telecoms laws to require big tech to register locally, provide regulators with the information, what they're doing exactly in this region, what their activities are, what the revenues are, what their numbers are. And this is very important. So I would suggest that this is an important step that governments can take today, and during the course of 2022, we can begin to see big tech being brought into the regulatory framework, being brought into tax frameworks and contributing to Caribbean societies.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to thank you gentlemen all for joining me this evening. We would have heard last from Mr. David Geary, who's the Digital Policy Ambassador. He's with Digicel. We'd have also heard from the Minister of Information in Antigua, Mr. Melford Nicholas. He's also president of the CARICOM Telecoms Union, and Mr. Selby Wilson, who is the lead negotiator for CARICOM Heads of Government with the CTU. Gentlemen, I want to thank you, Kurleigh Prescod, VP CWC for Barbados and the Windward Islands. I want to thank all of you gentlemen for joining me here this evening for what has been an interesting and robust conversation. I wish you all well in your endeavors in terms of what we're looking to do for the region to get our telecommunication space where we need it to be, to ensure that we too can be on that 5G platform and we can have not only low roaming rates or perhaps no roaming rates, but we can get to the point where our handsets and our phone bills aren't as near as a mortgage. Kurleigh, you're laughing, but you did say, yes, the price goes up, but people still afford them. But let's hope that we can get to the space where it is affordable for each and every one of us. Again, gentlemen, I want to thank you for giving up your Sunday evening and joining me here on the CBC for the People's Business. Do have a brilliant week going forward and the best of luck in your endeavors. Thank you, gentlemen. That's been the People's Business. I'm Wendy Burke.
Wendy.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.